Good evening, my friends. This is Paul, and today I'm going to be re-reviewing Super Mario Land 2 6 Golden Coins for the Game Boy, this time with video footage. When I originally reviewed the game, I thought it was one of the best 2D Mario games ever made, despite being one of the earliest 2D Mario games ever made. For that matter, in some ways it was so good that even the new Super Mario Bros. Games were taking steps backwards compared to how much this game innovated and pushed the series forward. This time around, I played it again through Switch Online, and I had a bit more of a mixed experience this time around, though hopefully I can come to a cohesive answer by the end of this. So I figured I'd start out with talking about what it is, since Nintendo didn't bother releasing Super Mario Land first on Switch Online. So from what I've heard, Super Mario Land was a very primitive game, even by Game Boy standards. It made the original Super Mario Bros. Look like Breath of the Wild in comparison, with how the screen crunched so much and the graphics were really lame. And this game took it up a notch by making the graphics completely overhauled so that the game looked much more like Super Mario World. And I think that makes it hold up relatively well. It's still in only two colors, so you still have trouble differentiating the foreground and the background sometimes, but it's much more pleasant to look at than the original Super Mario Land. It also boasts having a non-linear level structure, where only the first and the last levels you have to play in a specific order, but the rest of them you can more or less experiment within certain parameters. Some levels are just laying around as optional additional challenges for you. There are worlds to explore. Sometimes the worlds have branching paths, but you can go through the worlds in any order you want. And at the end of each world, you get a coin that's used to open up Wario's castle, which is the final level. And yes, this game marked the debut of Wario. And I am honestly amazed at how far Nintendo has taken a one-off villain in the Mario series and turned him into his own series. Like, what is it with Mario characters and, like, spinning off into their own series? What'll we have next? Vivian Chronicles, based on a character from Paper Mario 2? Super Mario Land 2's biggest strength is its level variety. There are just so many unique settings that we don't see too often in the Mario series, and in some cases we haven't really ever seen again. You've got a level that takes place in outer space with adjusted physics and Mario wearing a spacesuit and everything. That doesn't even happen in Super Mario Galaxy, so this game was way ahead of the times. There's a world where you're inside of a mechanical Mario and the textures are made out of like Lego bricks. There's one where you're inside a giant beehive, and it's really amazing. Even by Game Boy standards, the enemy designs manage to be very expressive of whatever the theming of the level is. The music, on the other hand, is kind of lame. I know the completionist praised it quite a lot in his episode, but I have to vehemently disagree. The theme that plays in the first level is really catchy. Everything else is very hit or miss, with some level themes feeling like slower variations of the first couple of notes of the first tune, and having a bunch of sounds in there, like, well, you can probably make the joke for yourself. And it definitely helps the game's soundtrack feel like it's a byproduct of a limited handheld device. It's especially made much worse to stomach when you take levels that have annoying themes, and usually it's those levels where the bad music is playing. There are quite a few levels that involve waiting around for something to happen, such as being on a conveyor belt and crouching so that you can get under the spikes as the conveyor belt slowly drags along, or bouncing on a beach ball across a bed of spikes, or going on a platform that has a certain trajectory and then jumping off at the right time. There's definitely less of an emphasis on speed and more of an emphasis on patience, which isn't inherently a bad thing, but I think taking the Sonic the Hedgehog approach of mixing it up a little bit would have been much appreciated. Thankfully, Super Mario Land 2 sort of mitigates this by introducing a new power-up called the the Bunny Carrot. Can't be ripping off Majora's Mask before it came out, can it? The bunny carrot basically gives Mario a pair of ears and also lets him take 2 hit points instead of just 1, and he can essentially hover across the stage. It's a lot slower than the Super Leaf is, but at the same time, I also feel like it's much more game breaking, especially because the Game Boy has a lot of screen crunch, so it is very hard to see where things are, especially with Mario's jump. Like, Mario jumps pretty high in this game, and a lot of times he jumps so high that it's hard to see the floor, and the bunny ears kind of let you fly over all of that. But when you don't have it, my gosh, it can be very hard to see what's below you and above you and around you, especially in that annoying auto-scroll level. But thankfully, most of the levels aren't auto-scrollers, so take a hint, newer games. I also really like how Super Mario Land 2 doesn't waste your time with a whole bunch of unnecessary stalling in the game. Sure, it has its slow down moments, which is unfortunate, but when you pick up a power-up, the game doesn't awkwardly freeze to show Mario powering up. It just keeps going. Same thing when you go through a warp pipe. Sure, there's like 2 seconds of loading screens when you go into a new zone, but that's a heck of a lot better than any loading screens. Overall, I think Super Mario Land 2 is a really good breath of fresh air in the Mario series. It doesn't feel afraid to innovate and be creative, and I think overall it's going to be one of the most memorable Mario games ever until there's a new Super Mario Brothers series that is really not afraid to take the Mario series in radical new directions. I do wish the game didn't have so many moments of screen crunch and waiting for stuff to happen. And I also just don't really like Game Boy and Super Nintendo controls to begin with. The Switch joystick was not exactly helping. I thought that would make it easier, but it actually made it much harder. But if you can get past these sometimes clunky controls and the impatient level design, then you're in for some really good times. I think you'll really like the non-linear structure of the game. I think you'll appreciate Wario's origins. I don't think you'll really like the game over session because you lose all of the coins that you got, but thankfully with Switch Online you can use rewinds and save states whenever you want. On top of there already being 3 save files in the base game, on top of coins being used to purchase additional items and 1-ups. So therefore, it's not that arbitrary collect 100 to get an extra life. That was inspired by the arcadey roots of Mario. Now, you feel like you have agency in the game. So it's definitely way more forgiving than most Game Boy games. If you're getting it as a bonus for Switch Online, then heck yeah, I think you should give it a try. Maybe not finish it if you're not used to the controls, but at least give it a try because you're getting it as a freebie. The 3DS eShop is about to close, so I don't know if I'd recommend rushing to get it quickly, but I have heard that it is pretty cheap on there, so that shouldn't be a problem. As for if you should get this on the original Game Boy if you don't have a Switch, I think you'd probably have a pretty enjoyable time. I don't know how much Game Boy games retail for, but it is relatively short, so I think you should probably pick it up if it's pretty cheap, as this gives you about 1 to 2 hours of gameplay, but it should be a pretty good time. So with that, thank you very much for watching. Let me know down in the comments what you thought of the video, and if you have any questions. Thank you so much to my patrons, Matthew Rakowski, Spoon Ghost, Splatcat, and Scooter Doodle, for supporting me on Patreon. The link will be in the description if you would also like to give me a hand during this time. And until the next time, remember to keep the faith, stay epic, and God bless. Bye!